I want to talk to you guys today about the unexpected key to unlocking limitless power as a creative. But first, I added this slide last minute because of Sean's comment about quitting coffee. By replacing your morning coffee with green tea, you can lose up to 87% of what little joy you still have left in your life. Coffee all the way. What we're going to cover this morning in the next few moments is first, the one thing that you need to know about yourself that hardly anyone else will tell you, and you should feel really good during this part. The second thing is the one thing you need to hear to unlock limitless power as a creative, and this part may and probably will hurt your feelings. And the last thing is a practical and pragmatic framework to connecting the two, and this should really be helpful for you. But first, who am I and why should you care what I have to say? A few years ago, and it's like you see a picture, look at how cute he is, oh my goodness. That's me, by the way. I did this exercise where I went back and tried to uncover my first memory. What's the very first memory that I had as a human being, right? What was the first thing that happened to me, first experience, first thing spoken to me that my little brain and psyche felt was valuable enough to commit it to long-term memory, right? And I grew up on 140 acres in North Carolina, and we had a spring, a natural spring that fed water to my house and my grandparents' house, and the spring pump had broken, and my Poppy, my grandfather, I called him Poppy, he was down there fixing it. My mom went down there, and I was with her. I was playing on the bank while she was talking to him while he was working on the spring house. I was 3 years old. This is probably about what age I was. And I was going up the side of the bank and running and sliding on my knees or on my bottom and trying to get as close to the creek as I could without going in. And my mom kept being like, Caleb, you're going to break your leg. You're going to hurt yourself. Quit doing that. You know, moms, right? And anybody moms, right? And my Poppy sticks his head out of the spring house where he's working. He's got a big chew of tobacco in his mouth. And he looks at me and he winks and smiles. And he looks at my mom and he says, Pam, leave that boy alone. There ain't nothing in this world worth that boy being afraid. That's my first memory. And it's marked pretty much my entire life. Now, when I was 11 years old, that same Poppy got a settlement. He was a pipe welder, and he got a settlement for contracting asbestosis, a small settlement. And he decided to take me and all of my family on a vacation to the Outer Banks. He'd never been able to do that before, so he took us all. We get there, and he hands all of us kids a $100 bill. He says, I want you guys to have fun. Man, I was rich, right? $100. And so, but I quickly started going through everything I wanted to do. I wanted to go deep sea fishing and buy a boogie board and do this and do that. And I realized $100 is not going to be enough. I got to solve this problem. And so we went to a flea market the next morning and I negotiated my first deal. I got a lady at the flea market to sell me 10 seashell necklaces. You know, the ones that Kenny Chesney used to wear, right? The ones that were all the rage. For $10. So I got 10 seashell necklaces for $10, and while the other kids were playing in the sand and jumping in the water that afternoon, I went up and down the beach looking for retired couples who would want to buy souvenirs for their grandkids. I assumed I was probably their grandkids' age, and I would remind them of their grandkids, and then I would pitch them on, hey, you could buy these all across the island for $5, or you could not have to get out of your beach chair and buy them from me for $10. I sold out of seashell necklaces in less than an hour. My $100 was now $200. I took the leftover profit from that. I had a good time at the Outer Banks, and I took the leftover profit of that, and I saved it in a piggy bank. And shortly after that, a few months, my parents ended up splitting up. And my mom had to go get a job at a Cracker Barrel. She'd never worked outside of the home before. And I saw her struggling financially as an 11-year-old. And I decided I was going to take the rest of my money and use it to fix a beat-up push lawnmower that had been in my shed and start a lawn care company. So I hand wrote a flyer. I took it to a local gas station and talked the owner into letting me stick it on the door. And within a week, I had my first 3 clients. Over the course of a year, I built a client list that was enough where I ended up hiring 2 of my buddies to work for me. And we mowed lawns all summer and into the fall. And I continued to grow and build that business for 15 years. It became a full-service landscaping company with multiple crews all across western North Carolina and upstate South Carolina, and I actually exited that business at age 26. Now, the next season was all about missions and music. I wanted to go from just working to make money to doing something for God and doing something for purpose. So I spent the next 10 years exclusively in missions work, crafting music, leading worship, and leading other people doing the same, and a bunch of other missions-related stuff, right? That was an avenue for impact for me. It aligned with my God-given purpose, and it was a new way for me to express my creativity. And there were some good things about that season, right? I was having an impact. I was serving, coaching, leading, and pastoring others, which was making my heart come alive. I had the ability to do something that I really enjoyed, and I felt like I was doing something for God, not just for myself, right? And it was very fulfilling for me in that season, but there were also some hard things. One, I felt financially irresponsible a lot of the time. I was surrounded by mostly sad and broke missionaries and creatives. Well, which was a mindset killer for me, and that led me to struggling to believe for more out of life. And then, I felt really alone because I wanted to believe for more, but the culture of Christian music, missions, and ministry is hard. I mean, a lot of entitlement, self-validation in the name of doing it for God, and a lot of small thinking. I built businesses on the side. I invested in more, and it was kind of a means of using my God-given gifts in a way that would expand my mindset. And I experienced some success, but I always felt guilty, as if just doing stuff for God wasn't good enough for me. And then in 2021, tragedy struck. My then 9-month-old son suffered an ultra-rare pediatric stroke. Rendered the whole right side of his body completely paralyzed, and he nearly died. He didn't move the right side of his body for almost 3 weeks. His medical team had come in multiple times and told us that if he lived, he would never walk and he would never talk. This obviously spun me out. I was terrified, and I lost control of myself. I lost 40% of my net worth and everything that I'd built financially in my life in 4.5 months to stock market losses. I grew a hideous beard, and I hit my heaviest weight ever. And the smile in that picture on my face was entirely fake. I was terrified. But one morning I remembered, there ain't nothing in this world worth that boy being afraid. I was driving in to the hospital that morning, as was my custom. I went home to be with my girls in the evenings, and I would go into the hospital. And I had the most real, raw, and vulnerable, honest moment with God that I've ever had in my life, and I told him to go F himself. But right after I cussed God out, punching the steering wheel, driving in, I started to believe again that there was nothing in this world worth being afraid. And that same day, moments later, my son defied the odds, shocked his medical team, and regained all movement. God exchanged my offering of honesty with the gift of faith. I have it on video, by the way. I wish I'd put it up here. The moment that my son moved his right arm for the first time in 3 weeks. But after that season, when the dust began to settle, God began to give me this word over and over and over again. It was different ways that it was communicated to me, but it was the same thing, and it was, Caleb, you've done a great job the last decade walking in 50% of your anointing. You're a king and a priest. Not just a priest, but most of all, you're a son. So since then, I found the Zechariah 6 harmony between the two roles of being a king and a priest. A priest is someone who ministers to God and facilitates God meeting with other people. And a king is someone who builds, who commands, who gathers resource, who leads. So I now own multiple businesses. I've raised close to $30 million in capital from investors, and he's just getting started with me. Caleb, why does this matter to me? Well, because I told you at the very start, that I was going to tell you the one thing that you need to know about yourself that hardly anyone else will tell you. And remember, you should feel good during this part of the talk. So it starts with, what is man's all? It's a big question. What is the purpose? What is the end game? What is man's all in the eyes of God? And it's Genesis 1:26. And God said, let us make man in our own image, after our own likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, over the cattle, and over everything on earth and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. You see, man's all, i.e. your all, your greatest fulfillment and purpose is not to create art, is not to create beauty, is not to build businesses, it's not to make money, it's not to do it's to bear the image of God. That is your all. That is everything. Bearing the image of God. And this is the first clue that you are a son of God, because sons bear the image of their father. Isn't he cute? I'm talking about the one on the left. The one on the right's okay. And I know something about my Father, and I know something about your Father, because He is the same. He is limitlessly creative. He is limitless purpose. He has limitless capacity. He is limitlessly wealthy. He is limitlessly compassionate. He is filled with limitless love. And let me tell you something. If you are His son, then you are His heir. You see, a son is an heir. And He has given you the same limitless capacity because you stand to inherit all that is His. If God can manage it, then He's put inside of you the capacity to manage it. But what about humility, Caleb? I mean, how can I walk around as if I had the limitless power of God? Well, let me tell you, even in humility, it further proves my point. You see, I wrote this quote the other day when I was preparing this talk, and I thought, man, that was really good, Caleb. Good job. See, humility is restrained strength or restrained power. A lamb need not be humble when a lion is nearby. He must only hide. The burden of humility rests solely on the lion because he is the one who has the choice. Your limitless power is in the command to be humble. Clothe yourselves, all of you, with humility toward one another, 1 Peter 5:5. You see, you cannot be humble if you are the lamb, only if you are the lion. The ability to choose proves that you are limitless in power, because if you don't have power to restrain, then how can you restrain it? You see, He's the good shepherd. It's because of this reality that He shepherds you. And in Christ, He demonstrates a lion and a lamb as one, because He knows how He made you. If you figure out on your own who you are, then you can do a lot of harm. But if He leads you into it, oh, the places you can go. You already have limitless power. You don't need to find it. You don't need to go get it. Dare I make the theologians in the room angry at me? You don't even need to believe in God to have limitless power. It's in who He created you to be. This is why people who don't trust Him do remarkable things on the earth, because they somehow tap into the limitless power that's built into their God nature. You feeling good yet? I told you should feel good during this part. It's about to get ugly. The one thing you need to hear to unlock this limitless power as a creative, and warning, again, this part could hurt your feelings, but let's start with the story of Adam. You see, Adam existed initially in a perfect place, the expression of God's perfect creative mind, and this perfect place was a place of rest, relationship, responsibility, and restriction. Rest, beauty, every need was met. relationship flourishing with Eve and with God. Responsibility. See, Adam had to work not for provision, but it was because of his purpose. It was part of who he was. And God would only come and walk with Adam in the cool of the day. The rest of the day, Adam worked. And then there was restriction. There was one tree in the middle of the garden that Adam should not eat from, the knowledge of good and evil. You see, God said in the perfect environment for the human soul to flourish, there should be something that man should have to say no to. Now, Adam ate of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, but it's important for us to define what does the word good mean and what does the word evil mean if we're going to get an accurate picture of what actually transpired when he ate of the fruit. Good is defined in this section of Scripture as pleasant, beneficial, things that are connected to God's nature. And then evil is actually defined not as wickedness or bad people who want to do nefarious things. It's actually defined as hardship, difficulty, and suffering. You see, eating the fruit caused Adam to know pleasant, beneficial, God nature type things alongside of hardship, difficulty, toil, and suffering. And this was outside of God's best way because Adam was supposed to be like him. You see, in Genesis 3:17, it says, to Adam he said, because you listened to your wife and ate fruit from the tree about which I commanded you, you must not eat from it. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil, you will eat food from it all the days of your life. You see, this was not a punishment. It was not punitive in nature. It was a logical consequence in God's divine created order. Work now had to become toil. Because knowledge of evil means knowledge of hardship. And if you eat of the fruit and obtain a knowledge of hardship, now the thing that once brought only pleasant, beneficial, good things, now also alongside of pleasant, beneficial, good things, also brings about difficulty and hardship and suffering. And so when God pushed Adam and Eve out of the garden, he said, Eve, now you're going to give birth through great pain, toil, and hardship. Adam, you are going to bring provision through great pain, toil, and hardship. The way now that you will be able to experience beneficial, pleasant, good, God-nature things is unfortunately through toil. And why is this context so important? Well, Adam screwed us all. Now, in order to unlock the limitless power inside of us for good, we have to do it through work, and work feels hard. Calm down, Karen. I'm not saying you're saved by work. I'm saying that partnering with God to create anything good as His Son now involves hard work, and there's no way around it. But God likes work. Actually, Colossians 3, whatever you do, work heartily. Like work hard. As if you're doing it for God and not for men, knowing that the Lord, through Him you'll receive your inheritance His inheritance as your reward because you're serving Jesus. Ecclesiastes 3, that everyone should eat and drink and take pleasure in all his toil, for this is God's gift to man. Proverbs 6, go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider its ways and be wise. It has no commander, no overseer, no ruler. It has nobody to tell it that it has to work. It just does it. It stores its provision in the summer. It gathers its food at harvest. God likes work. He's into it. And I promised I would hurt your feelings. So here it comes. Most creatives are lazy and entitled. Don't amen too loud. But I get it though. You spend a lot of time praying that God would send someone else to finance my art so that I can finally fulfill my purpose. Meanwhile, your family suffers. We have a manna mindset. Well, God will provide for me like manna in the wilderness for Israel, and yet we forget that manna was God's mercy in the midst of Israel's disobedience. We ask God for manna because we want to stay disobedient and God to pick up the check. Thinking that, people who work really hard and are successful, they probably got there through luck or from by doing something bad, being bad people. And we sit around waiting for the big break when someone will finally notice how awesome I am. You remember the 4 R's from earlier? Rest, relationship, responsibility, and restriction? If it is to be modeled after God's perfect way, then your creative expression must involve these 4 elements. Rest, there should be beauty and peace connected to your work. Relationship, there should be a connection to others through your work. Responsibility, there should be a sense of self-agency and ownership. And the reason it's not doing what you want it to do is your fault. And restriction, some things that are off limits, some things that you should say no to. Without these, not only will your creativity suffer, but your soul will suffer. I'm going to zoom in on responsibility and ask a few open-ended questions for you to consider. Are you taking ownership of your creative gift, like real ownership? Are you stewarding it intentionally, day after day? Do you have goals or only dreams? Do you live in the clouds, or are you bringing the big things that God's put in your heart into something tangible and real that you can do something about? Are you taking real and practical steps toward achieving those goals, or are you making excuses for why you can't? If you're not, you're being irresponsible. You're being lazy, and you're being entitled. So how can we solve this? Well, I have one thing I'll share, a simple, practical, pragmatic framework to connecting your limitless power with a godlike work ethic. And this should give you courage unless you stop listening because you're offended, and if so, you're helping prove my point. Here's what I call the Creative's Work Framework. WORK, and it's wonder, organize, refine, and kindle. Your work should start as a creative with wonder, blocking time intentionally each week to seek new sources of inspiration, books, art, nature, conversations. Get your mind and your heart in a place of wonder again. Maybe keep an idea journal. Write down all of the thoughts and the what-ifs that come to your mind, no matter how unformed or wild they are. Just record them and get them somewhere. They may mean something someday. Use mind mapping to regularly to visually plot out all of your ideas and see connections between them that maybe you wouldn't see otherwise. It's helpful to get a big whiteboard and just write down every idea that you've had over the last few weeks and see if any of them connect to each other. And then, once you've wondered, you have to organize. Now, set clear, achievable goals for each project that you want to work on. Break those goals into manageable tasks. Use a digital tool or a planner to schedule these tasks. Set deadlines and track your progress. I personally used to use a tool called Todoist. Now I use Asana. You can get Asana for free for a single membership just for task management. It's very, very robust in terms of being able to set deadlines for yourself, reminders, all of those kind of things. Making one task dependent upon the previous task so that you're able to organize the directive of your work. You can also collaborate with other people and share tasks. We use it at our firm for team-related task management and project management. And then not only organize your tasks, but organize your workspace to minimize clutter and distraction so you can create a conducive environment for creative work. If your mind feels like a mess, then just look around you and see if everything around you is a mess, because maybe that's why your mind's a mess. To put it simply, like my mom used to tell me, son, go clean your room, right? Just clean your room. If you're struggling with getting a creative flow, then don't start with beating yourself up because you suck. Start with cleaning your room. Get your space organized. Then refine your work. Regularly review your work with a critical eye and be open to changes that may enhance it. Man, this is hard for creatives because we marry our work, don't we? We don't like to hear that it's not good or that it's not where it should. I was talking to Rachel about this earlier, right? She was sharing about another author that she's working with, and they did some edits, and she was like, oh, it doesn't feel like my work anymore. Well, your work sucked, lady. It's not bad to hear that. It's the only way you'll get better, right? You can't go to the gym and try to bench press 300 pounds and fail and say, well, I'm not good at bench pressing. It's like, no, you got to work your way up to it. You're going to suck at first, at most things. Seek feedback from friends, from mentors, from a trusted group of creatives. Ask them to shred your work. Ask them to tell you only the things that are not good about it. If you do that, then you have the expectation that that's what they'll come back with, by the way. This is an emotional management hack. Only ask people to send you negative feedback if you don't want to feel bad about it. Because if you send them just saying, hey, give me feedback, then some of you expects them to come back loving it, and when they come back not loving it, that's when you feel the blow. But when you are asking them just to give you critical feedback on it, then you know what's coming, and you're prepared for it. And commit to growth, learning, refining your skills, and integrating new methods and techniques into the work that you do. The last thing is kindle, and this is probably the most important. Begin each day with a specific actionable task to ensure that you make tangible progress. Like Sean said, celebrate small wins and continuously set new exciting goals and challenges. And if you hit a creative block, change your environment, change your approach so that you can reignite passion and productivity. If you usually work in a coffee shop, try going and working at a park bench. It's amazing what will change when you simply change your exterior environment in your creative flow. If you follow this framework, I can guarantee that you'll inspire more people. You'll have greater fulfillment in your creativity. You will begin to realize your limitless power, and you'll move closer and closer every day to rightfully bearing the image of God. We have time for one last story? All right. This story is called The Psychiatrist and the Lady Whose Life Was a Disaster. Okay? So there was, this is a true story. There's a psychiatrist who built ultimately a extremely successful practice. But was starting on his practice, and he had a lady come in, and he thought his job was to give everyone the answers to their problems. That's what he thought. And so she comes in, and she begins to tell him how her life is absolutely falling apart. She's on the verge of divorce. Her kids want nothing to do with her. Her business is going bankrupt. Her personal health is suffering. There's nothing about her life, it seems, that is going well. She dumps the entire thing onto this psychiatrist, and on the other side of his face, he's sitting there thinking, I have nothing for her. I just want to tell her to do exactly what she feels like doing, crawl in a hole and die. He said, but then something happened. After she told me everything about her life that was broken and wrong and bad, she looked at me in the eye and she said, Doctor, please tell me that all of this is my fault. Why would you want this to be your fault, ma'am? This is horrible. Why would you want all of this to be your fault? And what she said next changed his practice forever. She said, because if it's all my fault, then I have the power to change it. If it's someone else's fault, then I'm powerless. But if it's mine, I can change it. You see, self-responsibility and self-agency is an unbelievably powerful thing. If we stop looking at everything around us that's stopping us from achieving what we want to achieve, and we begin to simply look at and give attention to the things that are our fault, the things that are inside of our control, then oh, the places we can go. Because you can get better. You can grow. But if you're blaming someone else because your life is not as fulfilling, your creativity is not as fulfilling, your art is not doing the things that you hoped that it would do and making the impact that you hoped it would make and reaching the people that you hoped it would reach and changing the lives that you hoped it would change, if you simply look at that and say, the reason that's not happening is because of me, then you have the power to get better and change it. And I'm not saying there aren't external factors that are against all of us, but don't think that you're the only one who has things that put your back against the wall. I was a broke missionary for 10 years, and then within 2 years went out and raised $30 million of capital and built multiple multi-million-dollar companies. My back was against the wall. I didn't belong in the rooms that I go into now. But I knew something about myself that I hope you know. You have limitless power, and there's nothing that you can't do. And I'm not saying this like some mamby-pamby pandering father figure. That's not who I am to you. I'm someone who believes it and am beginning to see the results of that kind of belief in my life. And I hope that you do too. You see, God is sovereign, and because you're in His image, you too have sovereignty. Self-agency, self-responsibility, and self-control are the greatest catalyst to unlocking your God-given limitless power. God has given you the keys, but you must unlock the kingdom. And He is committed to ensuring that you do. Thank you.